Metaphor ReFantazio, Atlus's latest and greatest title that's brought to you by the same minds behind Personas 3, 4, and 5. As a longtime fan of this company, it's a bit surreal to see this game finally come out. I've been following this title since its reveal way back in 2016 when it was referred to as Project ReFantasy. To put that into perspective, at the time, I just started my senior year of high school and Persona 5 hadn't come out in the West just yet. For the longest time, it felt like this game was never going to come out, since we went years without hearing anything about it. But lo and behold, the game was officially re-revealed last year as Metaphor ReFantazio, and it's now finally in our hands. Not only that, but Sega and Atlus decided to reach out to me and sponsor this video. So if you're interested in checking out the game for yourself, then click the link below to get started. There's even a free demo to try if you're interested. And hey, the game debuted with a score of 94 on Metacritic, making it one of the highest rated games of the year. And outlets like GameSpot and IGN have also been singing its praises, so you're gonna be in for a good time. But let's say you lack the time currently and just want to hear what I think of the game. While a full review of Metaphor is on the cards, that's not what we're going to be doing today. Instead, I want to focus on a different topic surrounding the game. During the lead up to release, I heard a lot of people criticizing Metaphor for just being more of the same. And if you don't play many Atlus games or only look at Metaphor from a surface level, then I can see where that group is coming from. However, this sentiment doesn't hold a lot of weight to it when we get down to the nitty-gritty of it all. Sure, Metaphor borrows ideas from the Persona series, like the followers and calendar system, but the game also takes inspiration from all over Atlus's catalog. It's just the most obvious with Persona because those games are easily the most popular ones. There's also the fact that it's being made by the same people who worked on the modern Persona games to take into consideration. Some people might see these superficial similarities and assume that Metaphor is a derivative experience and pass up on it as a result. But as someone who has played a lot of Atlus games in the past, I can assure you that not only does Metaphor do something unique with those returning concepts, but offers plenty of unique mechanics and ideas of its own that allows the game to stand on its own 2 feet. I think the first thing we should talk about is the structure, just to get the Persona comparisons out of the way. At a glance, it might look like Metaphor lifts its core foundations straight from Persona with the whole daily life / dungeon crawling split. Either choose to spend time with your companions or go out and fight monsters. But you can't waste too much time because time itself is against you. Both Metaphor and Persona follow this structure, but that's where the similarities end. Sure, they both use the calendar system and give players opportunity to use their time however they choose, but the context that binds these games together is completely different. Persona is trying to capture what it's like to be a teenager living in Japanese society. The day-to-day life segments are to help immerse the player into the world and get a good feel of what it's like to actually live there. You make friends with your classmates, work part-time jobs, and increase social parameters to help develop who you are. Persona is about the inner self and the masks that we wear around others. Metaphor might have similar daily life mechanics, but the execution and context surrounding them is entirely different. In Metaphor, you amass followers to help you succeed in the royal tournament. You're doing good deeds around the kingdom, not just for the sake of a better world, but because it'll help convince people to support your cause. The same is true for the virtues. You don't level up stats to help you become a more well-rounded individual. Rather, it's so that you can prove your leadership capabilities to others. The only way for you to take the throne is to become the pillar that can support the kingdom the most. The royal tournament is the crux of the game's narrative, and Metaphor puts in the effort to make that apparent. The calendar system is used to create tension and urgency. It forces you to properly choose how you want to spend your time. Do you go out and clear this dungeon so you can rise in the popularity polls, or maybe you spend the night indoors and cook some meals? Learn a thing or two about the people around you and how they feel about the situation. The mere act of traveling to a location takes in-game time, so deciding to raid a dungeon or tackle a quest comes with a lot of commitment. Hell, quests themselves even come with time limits, and will expire if you take too long to complete them. When you look at the way these games handle their structure side by side, then you can easily tell how they differ from each other. One game focuses on self-improvement and identity on an individual level, while the other one is a bit more broad, putting more of an emphasis on the community of the world. At the same time though, the individuals in question also play an important part to your party progression. Speaking of which, the way that Metaphor handles combat follows the same trend. It takes some of the foundations laid out by Atlus's previous games, but puts a new spin on them while also adding brand new mechanics and features to make it feel wholly unique. The combat of Metaphor is built off of the press turn system from the Shin Megami Tensei games. Your team can make a handful of actions per turn, and by striking an enemy's weakness, you'll be able to earn more actions, but the same rules apply to the enemy. What Metaphor does differently than other games in the series is in its row system and character classes. At any point during your turn, you can swap what row your character is in with the D-pad. Your position on the battlefield has an impact on the amount of damage physical attacks deal out. Characters in the back row take less damage from physical, making it a pretty reliable spot to keep your magic-focused characters. Magic ignores the rules completely, but remember, the same is also true for the enemy team. There are even attacks that target specific rows to help keep things interesting. I was fighting a dragon early on in the game, and I noticed that I had attacks that could only target characters in the back row, making me consider if it was truly the best position for certain party members. This row system works in tandem with the archetypes. These are essentially your character classes. Each archetype is equipped with its own set of skills, elemental affinity, and weapon type. You start off with only the Seeker archetype, but you unlock more as you progress through the story and gain more followers. Archetypes are very different than similar ideas featured in past games. Personas and the Atma avatar forms in Digital Devil Saga are fully modular. You're able to customize them as you see fit, and while that level of freedom is nice, it can lead to some rather boring team compositions. I know that by the end of my playthroughs, I tend to end up with the same teams every time. Metaphor's archetypes are a bit more restrictive in comparison, though this is to the game's benefit. Archetypes are locked to fixed rules in combat. Warriors are great physical fighters that specialize in slash attacks, but don't have much else going on beyond that. The Seeker is a mixed class with no real specialty, but the variety in their skill selection makes it a great class for on-the-fly decision-making. There's no perfect class in Metaphor. All of them come with innate benefits and drawbacks that you need to take into consideration when building your team. Archetypes aren't completely rigid though. You can still customize them with skill inheritance, but you're limited to one slot and have to pay a hefty fee depending on what skill you want to move over. It's a good idea to experiment with archetypes on characters for the sake of having a backlog of skills to inherit. Your archetype choice doesn't just affect the core battles either. Since every archetype specializes in a certain weapon type, it influences how you can approach enemies in the overworld. Atlus games have always experimented with random encounters. They've done traditional ones, overworld enemies, and even stealth in Persona 5's case. However, the way it's handled in Metaphor is easily my favorite. On the overworld, you engage with enemies in fast battles. These are real-time encounters that see you and your allies wail on the enemy. Manage to break their stagger bar and you can enter the fight with a bit of a bonus. Mess this up and you'll be getting smacked by the enemies on the first turn, and on harder difficulties, this could be a major problem. What I like about Metaphor's approach to this system is how it gives archetypes a second purpose outside of combat skills. When picking an archetype for the main character, you need to not only consider its effectiveness in combat, but you also need to take the weapon class into account. Two-handed swords are sluggish, but pack a punch. Staves deal area of effect damage, but come with long startup and cooldowns for the attacks. Boxing gloves are great for overworld encounters, but aren't amazing in combat. What's really cool is that you can actually kill enemies on the overworld through fast battles if you overpower them in levels. This makes it a great tool for grinding if you just need to get a few extra experience points or resources before calling it a day. A lot of the things that people have been criticizing feel a bit unfair to me. Like, should good mechanics and design really be excluded because they're featured in other games? I don't recall many people getting upset that Digital Devil Saga uses the press turn system from Nocturne. A good mechanic is a good mechanic, and it's not as if Metaphor is lifting those old ideas wholesale without doing anything new with them. Whether that be through presenting them through a different context or making rather substantial changes that ultimately change the core of the system. If you try hard enough, you can find overlap in anything that just so happens to be made by the same studio. Games are made by people, and people are shaped by their experiences. Metaphor is a new IP, yes, but it's still an Atlus game. Of course there's gonna be some DNA shared with their most popular games. And this is even considering all the unique qualities innate to Metaphor. A high fantasy JRPG that focuses on what it means to be a leader and finding out who we can trust our nation's future to, all the while critiquing the status quo of the world? Can we actually be united as one nation, or are we forever doomed to be divided by our heritage and lineage? That sounds pretty unique to me. Metaphor isn't a special game because it reinvents the wheel or trashes everything that came before it. Rather, it embraces its origins, taking lessons learned from those previous games to craft an experience that you can't find anywhere else. and I for one can't wait to fully sink my teeth into it. And you can too, right now in fact. Metaphor ReFantazio is available for purchase. There's also a free demo you can try out too if you want to get a hands-on impression. Don't worry about your save progress either, since it carries over into the full game, so you can start right where you left off. You can find out more by following the links in the description. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and a very special thanks to all of my channel supporters whose names are on screen now. It's because of you guys that I'm able to get opportunities like this at all, and I'm extremely privileged to be in the position that I am in now. Seriously, I can't thank you all enough.